Q&A, but that's actually a perfect segue, Seong-Hoon, into, I think, Joelle's paper, which will talk about one of the applications of the SLP data, looking at financial literacy and, if I'm not mistaken, long-term care insurance. So that's a beautiful, beautiful transition. Joelle, would you like to share your slides?
Sure, let me get them up. We tested the share screen a while ago, so I hope it works.
And meanwhile, we'll all just sit here in panel size and be thinking about the SLP.
Can you see the slides?
Yes,
fantastic. Right, okay. Thank you so much for the invite to present at the CIPHER. And although it's quite late in the evening here over at Singapore, we'll do our best to kind of present what we have on the panel, and hopefully some of these the SLP database could be interesting to some of you. So my talk today is on financial literacy and long-term care insurance ownership using data from the SLP. And it's largely, this study is together with Pauline, who is the PI at SLP. And it's largely motivated by the fact that Singapore, as well as several countries in Asia, are aging rapidly. So Singapore is slated to become a super-aged society by 2025, whereby 1 in 5 Singaporean citizens will be aged 65 or over. So in that sense, very soon we'll be joining the likes of Japan and South Korea in terms of our agedness. And clearly, when there's this growth in the oldest old segment in our population, long-term care insurance becomes at the forefront of the policy agenda. So long-term care insurance would allow rational and risk-averse individuals to pool their risk, and especially in their old age, right? But private long-term care insurance, or LTCI markets in many countries are very small, including the US. So for example, work by McGarry, Brown, and others have shown that just about 10 to 15% of older adults in America are covered by private long-term care insurance. And in Singapore, like what some other countries have done around the world, what we did was to explore a private partnership LTCI program, and that is called the ElderShield program, which will be the topic that I'll present today. So Singapore's ElderShield LTCI program is a social insurance program. However, there exists very little research on this scheme, despite the fact that it was set up quite some years ago, about 2 decades ago, back in 2002. So it was set up by the Ministry of Health, sort of design architect by our ministry. However, the private sector, the commercial insurers, were the one who sold the policies and marketed the policies. So from a risk angle, the insurers actually carried the liability risk, they collected the premiums, and they managed their own portfolios. So very much is like private LTCI, just that the government kind of intervened in the market by introducing, coordinating this scheme. And some of these qualitative studies that were published earlier on the ElderShield have found that were quite descriptive. They offer a good overview of the scheme in terms of its various features, such as the fact that it's voluntary, it is not mandatory, and that the participants would join the scheme at age 40, and they start paying premiums all the way until age 65. At any point during this period in their life, as long as they are covered by the scheme, they can make a claim when they suffer from severe disability. And by severe disability, the scheme specifies 3 or more ADLs, which is quite typical of LTCI policies around the world. So the research goal in this study using the SLP was to examine the determinants of private LTCI ownership among the SLP respondents, which is a representative sample, as we just heard, of the older adults in Singapore. And the two questions were what factors drive LTCI demand? And we had this focus on financial literacy and its role in terms of LTCI demand. For those of us who have not been to Singapore, it's this small little island right smack in Southeast Asia. So we are a small city-state. And here we have the Singapore Life Panel is administered by the SMU. And we just heard that it's a very rich panel data where the participants are interviewed monthly. So for our study, we did not really exactly take advantage or leverage on this high frequency data, but nonetheless, we used this some questions in there which were useful because this ElderShield program kind of evolved over time. But right in 2018, the SLP captured the LTCI ownership of these elderly adults in the panel, and they asked this question: are you enrolled in ElderShield, yes or no? So that is our key dependent variable. And our explanatory variables, various things like social demographics, income, wealth, such has been explored in prior studies in US and elsewhere. But what we wanted to focus on and highlight was the role of financial literacy. And in terms of financial literacy, we drew on the rich literature that financial literacy is defined as the ability to use both knowledge and skills. And SLP, being quite rich in terms of the range of variables, had both knowledge aspects, which included the big three questions by Lusardi and Mitchell, as well as the education, which we also classify under knowledge, and they also had the skills aspects. So the skills included skills in managing household finances, awareness of the finances, and whether these people had long-term plans for savings and spending. So we drew on work by many researchers, including those at RAN, for example, Angela Hung and Joelle. So the findings were pretty interesting. So I'll jump straight to the findings because it's a short 10-minute presentation. What we had is that we found that about half of the elderly sample actually have long-term care insurance, and this is considered private LTCI. And it's pretty high by global standards because remember that in America, only about 10 to 15% coverage. So in Singapore, 48% coverage is pretty high. And this, what drives long-term care insurance demand in Singapore, a few things: income, wealth, that they're working currently, the number of chronic conditions, right? If they have more chronic conditions, they tend to, they're more likely to buy LTCI. Bequest motives, expectations of moving to a nursing home, they'd be more prompted to buy the LTCI, and if they trusted the insurers. So these are some usual suspects and quite in line with previous studies which have looked at LTCI demand in private markets around the world. What is interesting here was this role of financial literacy, and we indeed find a significant and positive role of financial literacy on LTCI demand. So this table just shows the marginal effects from the logic regressions. Education was also significantly predictive of this LTCI demand. However, the financial skills, so we had the knowledge aspects and the skills aspects, right, as part of financial literacy. The skills aspects didn't come up significant in our study. So that was interesting, and it maybe tells us something about how people decide in terms and evaluate in terms of their LTCI decision making. So the conclusions very quickly is that what we observed in the study, very high rates of private LTCI ownership, and then the success of the ElderShield LTCI scheme, partly due to the rollout of standardized policies that were affordable, which was a policy aspect, They offer only basic protection, and there was no underwriting involved. So that partly accounted for the success of this ElderShield LTCI scheme in Singapore. And what we can do further to boost demand in the LTCI market would be to promote financial education and literacy, because we saw clearly that the financial knowledge aspects were important in terms of explaining LTCI demand, whereas the skills aspects were not too important. So there's not much we should push on that front, but the knowledge front, perhaps the policy makers and administrators can do a bit more in terms of pushing that financial knowledge. So I'll just end here and I welcome any questions, comments later on. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Joelle. And as I said, that was a great coda to Seong Hoon's talk about the SLP and just giving us a very good sense of what the SLP data can do, especially in getting such beautiful, beautiful statistical power with the sample size.